Let's look at text H, and before we start discussing, maybe we could just scan the passage and look for some of our favorite key words, because that's a good way to get everybody jump started. And kolōnos, there's this word that we've been translating as tumulus, but in a sense it's any marker, whether the marker is natural or artificial, that points to the dead body of a hero, and to that body as a talisman of fertility and prosperity. Very important word. And here, the person who is initiated is telling the person who is uninitiated about a kolōnos, except this one is not on the northwest side of the Hellespont. It's on the southeast side. And this kolōnos belongs to Achilles himself. And it's a perfect example of a tumulus that is very prominent in the landscape, not only because, let's imagine a heap of stones piled up by the men of Achilles to build a tomb for Achilles, but it's already situated on a high vantage point that is overlooking the Hellespont, both in the general direction of north and the general direction of west, and maybe also east. It's hard to imagine exactly how it works. Okay. But here it is. Presumably, the initiated person is pointing across the Hellespont to the other side, and there it is. It's visible.
You can see it, yeah.
And there you see it standing at the brow of the promontory, and the octave is already a kind of natural formation that lends itself to being noticed. That is a landmark in and of itself.
And so is the brow, right? The brow of it is a
and it's the earth jutting out against the sea and reaching for the sky. So there's a poetics of space here. Bachelard would call it poetics of space, or la poétique de l'espace. And you notice that it's described as something that's heaped up by the Achaeans. So you imagine bit by bit, I think that's the word, it's heaped up, stone upon stone. And yes, it's not only the tomb of Achilles, but it's already the tomb of Patroklos, whose funeral games are a preview of Achilles' funeral and funeral games. And there they will be buried together. Then there's this etiology, where, if I'm right, what's happening here is an explanation of ritual practice by way of myth, which is what an etiology is. And it's not that we should be naive and think that an etiology is actually the set of events that cause a ritual, but in terms of the myth, that's what these events are. So it's an ideology. It's not that we anthropologically can say that a myth came before a ritual. We can't say that, but there it is. An explanation, an aition, aitia, an etiology for why Achaeans in the historical period, when they're no longer called Achaeans, wear their hair short, whereas back in the Trojan War, they wore their hair long. And if you accept this explanation, then the reason people in the historical period wear short hair, except for the Spartans, they're always going to be different. But everybody else, all male populations, by and large, wear their hair short. And that's because Achilles cut his hair. And so now everybody cuts their hair. And that took me a long time to figure out that that's what this passage is saying. But guess what? The Iliad is already saying it. In the Iliad, it's made very clear that when Achilles cuts his hair, all the Achaeans cut their hair too.
They pile up the hair on the tomb of Patroklos.
So it's an offering to the cult hero, and in a sense, it shows the demarcation between the heroic age and the post-heroic age. It's happening. It's starting to happen.
There are variations on that notion. I remember you telling me once that all the males in Argos, adult males, are bald, actually.
Well, that's an exaggerated variation,
Okay.
and our colleague Natasha has beautiful things to say about it in her doctoral dissertation, where an extreme version
Right.
of this model of being long-haired in the heroic age and short-haired in the post-heroic age, an extreme variation on that is the rivalry between the Spartans and the Argives,
So
where
you have that
they go all the way. Is
Uh-huh.
Spartan male warriors have long hair,
Right, which
as
they
if they
call-
were still in the heroic age, and Argive male warriors have bald heads.
Right.
And so that's a special case.
Okay.
But I quite agree with you.
Yeah.
It's the same kind of opposition as Prague school linguists would
Right.
say, except it's an exaggerated opposition.
Right, right.
And I'm going to turn to Natasha and say, does that square with your research?
I was just somehow thinking precisely what you said a second ago about Sparta intentionally placing itself in the heroic age.
Yes, they're always exceptionalists. I shouldn't say always, but even that anecdote about Leonidas and how he can trace himself back to Heracles by just
Absolutely.
20 generations.
And the way he dies
The way
is
he dies.
somehow, according to my research, this is a reenactment of the myth not as a ritual but as a myth, sort of full force reenaction, not just 5% reenaction.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And just leave it to the Spartans to do it like
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I love to come back to that beautiful anecdote in Herodotus, Book 7, or Scroll 7 as we like to call it, where the Persian king of kings sends spies to observe what the Spartan warriors are doing during their last hours alive. And so there they are combing their hair because they don't want to have a bad hair day when they die. And as I like to say it to people when I try to describe it, is they're preening for death. And so there you have the mythological ingredient of the heroic age reused with a vengeance.
Yes, exactly.
And yet I would still say that the Spartans are an exception. Just as the Argives, your favorite people, are.
I so much agree that the Spartans are setting themselves up as an exception, as people who can reenact the heroic age fully, that they still live in there. And I think,
Yes.
somehow, as I reconstruct the relationship between Sparta and Argos in the 5th century, I think Argos actually was trying to perhaps make Spartans less of an exception and bring them gently into the world of ritual as opposed from the world of the myth.
That's beautiful.
And it really harmonizes well with your point, right? Which is that this is a demarcational event, right?
Yes, it's a demarcation, it's a mode of communication. It shows how ritual and myth,
Right.
the way they work together, you can never say hard and fast things about it. Oh, I just did by saying never. But it's a mode of communication, and even enemies can talk the same language, so to speak. And in that research paper on Asopos, which I'd like to share with the participants, I even talk about mythological contracts, that deadly enemies from one city and another city can buy into myths where they actually share details of the myth, except that the myth privileges one side and the other side in ways that is suitable to them.
So I would say that probably they are deadly enemies in myth, and in real life the elites can be quite friendly.
Or they can even be friendly,
Yes.
but they can also be deadly enemies.
Yeah, absolutely.
okay.
It's
You
all
can't
very
predict.
fluid. Just chapters of my dissertation.
Could you just mention as earmarks what are the chapters that we have touched on?
Well, actually, all 4 Argive chapters are more or less connected. Well, somehow they are using this passage in Herodotus about long-haired Spartans and short-haired Argives as a linchpin. So it's one big
I love that.
circle.
And I think the metaphor of linchpin is perfect. Is that here's a theme, an opposition, long hair, short hair, and we've seen one way of thinking about it, which is heroic warriors, post-heroic warriors. But then even in the post-heroic era, you can have oppositions of long hair, short hair, or very long hair, no hair at all.